During midday, Susan found herself adjusting to her new reality trapped in her son Paul's body. She sat in the passenger seat of her car, a small family sedan that had always felt lived in, like a second home. Susan was dressed in Paul's blue t-shirt and cargo shorts, gripping the dashboard tightly, her heart racing as they rolled down the road. "Okay, Paul, just breathe. You've got this," Susan coached, trying to keep her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling within. "Focus on the pedals. Left foot for the clutch, right foot for the gas." I know. Paul snapped back, his newly feminine voice carrying a hint of his own exasperation as he adjusted to the peculiarities of his new body. Driving felt like trying to balance on a tightrope while getting used to someone else's weight, gait, and large oobs on his chest. "It's just weird." "You'll get used to it," she reassured, trying to ignore the face she caught a glimpse of in the rearview mirror, not her own, but with Paul's boyish features and scruffy hair. The swath of his young body felt uncooperative. The car drifted slightly, and Susan held her breath. "Don't forget to check mirrors. Look over your shoulder to check your blind spot before changing lanes." "I'm not the kid anymore, Mum," Paul insisted, but his nervous fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, and she could tell he was doing his best. As they approached the supermarket, Susan felt a swell of pride, mixed with anxiety. "Okay, remember, turning into the parking lot, signal left." Paul clicked the blinker on, turning awkwardly into the lot. "This feels like a video game," he muttered, taking a wide turn and accidentally cutting off another car. "Watch it," Susan yelled, hands flying up to her face. "You just made us look like idiots." "It wasn't my fault, I didn't know how to judge the distance." He shot back as he tried to navigate into a parking spot. They bumped slightly against the curb before coming to a stop. Both of them sighed in relief. Once out of the car, they faced each other, and tension crackled in the air. "You walk like a robot," Susan criticized, observing her son's awkward strides as he swung his arms too much and seemed unsure of how to control his long limbs. "You need to walk like a lady, with grace and poise." "I can't help it if you move like a girl," Paul retorted, a smirk creeping onto his face. "Maybe you should work on your posture, Mum. You're hunching like you're trying to dodge an imaginary laser beam." "Ha, very funny," she replied dryly, struggling to keep her own walk confident. "You should try not looking like you're about to trip over every sidewalk crack. Men and women walk differently, you know." "I'm doing my best," Paul said, sounding more frustrated as he caught a glare from an elderly lady walking past. "This is all your fault, remember? I'm the one in a skirt and heels while trying to keep my balance." Susan crossed her arms, stifling the laughter bubbling up inside her. "Then maybe try walking like you didn't just learn how to do it yesterday," she countered playfully, her earlier anxiety giving way to a ridiculous sense of camaraderie, even in their bizarre situation. Okay, just maybe stop saying everything I'm doing is wrong," he quipped with a begrudging smile. "Fine, I'll work on my criticism," Susan admitted. "But you need to walk with a little more elegance, you know? You're in a woman's body now." As they stood outside the supermarket, a gentle breeze tousled Paul's hair, and Susan caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass doors. The face staring back at them was a mix of confusion and determination. It was her own visage, but with Paul's youthful energy. "Hold on a second," Susan said, her voice suddenly energetic. "I just realized something." "What now?" Paul replied, exasperation creeping back into his tone as he traced the outline of the building. She glanced around, making sure no one was watching. "Let's find a spot where we can fix your face a bit before we go in. You can't just walk into the supermarket looking like, well, you." Paul raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" But the curious tone in his voice suggested he was intrigued. "Just over there," Susan said, nodding toward a semi-hidden corner of the parking lot, tucked away behind a bush. "We can't let the world see you like this." A reluctant smile tugged at the corners of Paul's lips as he followed her, the thrill of mischief brightening his nervousness. They ducked into the corner, where the view of the parking lot and the entrance was partially obscured. "Okay, bend down," Susan instructed, her heart racing with the exhilaration of the moment. "Bend down? Why?" Paul asked, tilting his head in confusion. "Because I need to apply some lipstick and eyeshadow," she said with a confidence only a mother could muster. "We're not going in looking like you just rolled out of bed." With a dramatic sigh, Paul rolled his eyes but obediently bent down, lowering himself to her level. As her fingers deftly applied the lipstick, Susan felt a rush of nostalgia. It reminded her of the times she had done this, when Paul was younger playing dress-up during a long rainy afternoon, the two of them laughing as they transformed each other into something whimsical. "Wow, this is, well, different," Paul admitted, his voice muffled as he squinted at her with a smirk. You better not mess it up. Trust me, I have a steady hand, Susan said, carefully applying a touch of eyeshadow, which brought out the intensity of the hazel eyes she had marvelled at since birth. She manoeuvred the brush with surprising finesse, feeling both maternal and slightly mischievous as she added just the right amount of sparkle. There, perfect, she declared, stepping back to admire her handiwork. Paul blinked, surprised by the slight transformation. He could hardly believe the reflection in the glass window nearby was his. Okay, I guess this is a little better, he conceded, flashing a reluctant grin. Just wait till we hit the aisles. Susan laughed, excitement bubbling within her. The thought of shopping together in this unconventional setup felt surreal and exhilarating. All right, let's do this, Paul said, standing up straight, the earlier tension in his shoulders easing. She linked her arm through his, and together they strolled toward the entrance, feeling a mixture of adrenaline and humour. As they stepped over the threshold into the brightly lit supermarket, a wave of groceries and scents enveloped them: fresh produce, baked bread, and just a hint of coffee wafting from the cafe inside. Just act natural, Susan whispered as they manoeuvred their way through the entrance, scanning the aisles. Natural, huh? Paul replied, rolling his eyes but then throwing his shoulders back, attempting to channel the confidence of the person he now inhabited. Just take it slow and try to smile as if everything is fine. Upon exiting the store, Susan, trapped in her son Paul's body, pushed the shopping cart's handle, feeling the strength in Paul's youthful limbs as she navigated the busy parking lot. The cart was heavy, packed with groceries for the week, its wheels occasionally wobbling as it rolled over cracks in the pavement. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the asphalt, and the heat from the pavement radiated upward, making the air thick and warm. Behind her, Paul, inhabiting his mother Susan's body, hurried to keep up, his unfamiliar legs moving in an unfamiliar feminine gait. The discomfort of Susan's worn flats pressed against his feet, and the weight of her purse slung over one shoulder threw off his balance. He felt the stiffness in his borrowed joints, the slight ache in the lower back that he had never noticed his mother complain about before. Despite all of that, he kept a smile on his face. Slow down, I'm not as young as I used to be, Paul called out instinctively, his voice high and feminine in a way that still startled him. The phrase left his lips before he even had time to think about it, a familiar complaint that his mother had uttered countless times before. Susan stopped in her tracks, turning around in Paul's body to stare at him. A mixture of amusement and bewilderment flickered across her son's her own face. The absurdity of the situation hit them both at once, and for a brief moment they were simply two people trying to process their new reality. Paul let out a sigh, shaking his head. This is so weird, he muttered, shifting the purse strap on his shoulder. Susan, still adjusting to the strength and energy of Paul's body, exhaled in exasperation. Tell me about it, she said, her voice deeper, richer Paul's voice. A gust of wind blew through the parking lot, rustling the plastic grocery bags and pushing a loose receipt across the pavement. Around them, other shoppers moved through their daily routines, completely unaware that a mother and son had switched lives, struggling to make sense of their own reflections. Although Susan was the adult, she got into the passenger's seat. Paul, in his mother's body, got behind the driver's wheel. Remember to look both ways before pulling out, Susan reminded Paul. I will. And don't forget, until we have this all sorted out, you must never ever tell anyone about our body swap. I won't. As the golden hues of late afternoon bathed the quiet suburban street, Susan pedaled her bike leisurely down the sidewalk, enjoying the breeze against her Paul's skin. She let herself get lost in the rhythmic motion, the sound of tires rolling over pavement, unaware of what was unfolding back at home. Inside the house, Paul sat on the couch next to Benjamin, his heart racing slightly as he stole a glance at his former father, now his husband. Benjamin's expression was calm, unreadable, but there was a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. You think Susan suspects anything? Benjamin asked, his voice hushed as he leaned closer to Paul. Paul smirked, shaking his head. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. She thinks we're trying to swap back. A slow, warm smile spread across Benjamin's face. He nodded approvingly, his fingers brushing against Paul's hand in a brief, intimate touch. That's good, Benjamin murmured, his voice carrying a note of relief. They let the conversation drift into silence as they settled into the couch together. Benjamin wrapped an arm around Paul, pulling him in close. Paul melted into the embrace, resting his head against Benjamin's chest as the soft glow of the television flickered across their faces. For a while, they simply sat there, watching whatever program happened to be on, their breathing slow and in sync. But then, Paul shifted uncomfortably, letting out a small sigh. Ugh, he groaned, adjusting his position. My body feels achy and tired all the time. Benjamin glanced down at him with quiet amusement. You're just not used to it yet. Paul rolled his eyes. It's not just that. These bras are too tight, the shapewear is suffocating, and don't even get me started on control pantyhose. I feel like I'm being squeezed from all sides all the time. He let out another sigh. And make up God. The time it takes to put it on and take it off, it's exhausting. Benjamin chuckled softly, stroking Paul's arm. Sounds like you're struggling. Paul turned his head up to look at Benjamin, a small, knowing smile curving his lips. Oh, I am. But it's worth it. Benjamin arched a brow. I love having this body, Paul admitted, voice quieter now, but filled with certainty. Everything I have to do to maintain it, all the little inconveniences, it's worth it. And I wouldn't give it up for anything. Benjamin's smile softened, his fingers tracing slow, reassuring circles on Paul's shoulder. Then I'm glad you have what you want. Paul nestled closer, letting his eyes flutter shut for a moment, savouring the warmth of Benjamin's touch, the deep comfort of simply existing in this body, the body he had chosen. The afternoon sun had begun its slow descent, casting long golden shadows across the backyard. A warm breeze rustled the trees, carrying with it the scent of freshly cut grass. Susan now, in Paul's young athletic body, stood across from Benjamin, her former husband, who now played the role of her father. They tossed a football back and forth, their conversation casual but laden with meaning. Earlier, they had spoken quietly inside the house, while Paul was away at the salon, getting his hair styled. You think Paul suspects anything? Benjamin had asked, his voice low, careful. Susan smirked, shaking her head as she leaned against the kitchen counter. No, he doesn't suspect a thing. He thinks we're still trying to swap back. Benjamin exhaled in satisfaction, a warm smile settling on his face. Good. Then, after a moment, he added, Susan's eyes snapped up, sharp and clear. It's Paul, she corrected firmly. Even when we're alone. I'm Paul now. Benjamin hesitated, then nodded. Paul, he said, accepting the new reality. Now, in the backyard, they moved effortlessly through their game of catch, Susan reveling in the way her body felt strong, fast, capable. She caught the ball easily, her reflexes quicker than she ever remembered. I feel amazing, she admitted, spinning the ball in her hands before throwing it back to Benjamin. I can run for miles. I can bike all day. Just moving feels incredible. Benjamin caught the ball with practiced ease. Sounds like you're enjoying yourself. Oh, I am, Susan said with a grin. But there are drawbacks. Benjamin raised an eyebrow as he tossed the ball back. Like what? Susan caught it and sighed, like being treated like a kid. Adults just brush me off. My ideas, my opinions, none of it matters because I look like I'm 10. I say something important, and they just smile and nod like I'm cute or something. She rolled her eyes. And school. God, school is the worst. Benjamin chuckled. What, you don't like relearning basic math and history? It's not that I don't like it. It's that it's pointless. I already know most of this stuff, or at least, I knew it before. And the stuff I don't remember? It's because it was never important enough to stick in the first place. She shook her head. But even with all that, it's worth it. Just to feel this good every day. Benjamin smiled knowingly, gripping the football. So you wouldn't trade back, even if you could? Susan's expression turned serious. She met his eyes, then gave a small, firm shake of her head. Never. Benjamin let out a soft chuckle, and then, without warning, launched the football high into the air. Think fast. Susan's eyes widened in surprise, but she reacted instinctively, sprinting backward, leaping up, and catching it effortlessly. When she landed, she turned to him with a grin. Nice try, old man, she teased. Benjamin laughed, shaking his head. Guess I'll have to step up my game. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow over the backyard as they continued their game. Two people who had once been husband and wife, now father and son, bound by a secret they would never share, and neither of them would change a thing. The morning light streamed through the bedroom window as Paul stood in front of his full-length mirror, dressed only in a lacy bra and snug shapewear. His plus-sized, feminine body reflected back at him as he carefully considered his outfit for the day. Stylish, elegant, sophisticated, just as he wanted. Behind him, Susan sat on the edge of the bed, textbooks and notebooks spread around her. She scribbled answers onto her homework, glancing up occasionally at Paul as he meticulously sifted through his wardrobe. "Do you think Benjamin suspects anything?" Susan asked suddenly, keeping her voice low. Paul barely paused, sliding a satin blouse off a hanger and holding it against himself. "No," he said confidently. "Dad thinks I'm his wife. He doesn't have any idea that we have switched bodies." Susan exhaled in relief, nodding. "Good. It's important that no one knows, especially your dad." Paul turned to her with a smirk. "You mean your husband?" Susan rolled her eyes. Yeah. My husband, your dad. You know what I mean." Paul chuckled. "Either way, he doesn't suspect a thing. He looks at me and sees his loving wife. As long as we don't slip up, he'll never know the truth." Susan nodded in agreement, returning to her homework while Paul turned his attention back to his morning routine. Paul carefully selected the perfect ensemble-fitted skirt that accentuated his curves, a chic blouse that gave just the right air of effortless elegance, and sleek heels that added a graceful confidence to his stride. Satisfied with his selection of outfit, Paul returned his focus to getting ready. He spent the next half hour meticulously perfecting his look, styling his hair, applying makeup with precision, and selecting the perfect accessories to complement his outfit. Every step was deliberate. Every detail mattered. Meanwhile, Susan finished the last of her assignments, stuffing her notebooks into her school bag just as the sound of the approaching school bus rumbled down the street. "I'll see you later," she called, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. Paul, now fully dressed and perfectly made up, turned from the mirror and smiled. "Have a good day at school, kiddo." Susan shot him a look before heading out the door, leaving Paul to admire his reflection one last time before stepping out into the world as the perfect version of himself. The coffee shop was cozy, filled with the gentle hum of conversation and the scent of freshly brewed espresso. Paul adjusted the bracelet on his wrist as he slid into the booth across from Tamara, who smiled warmly at him. Her light blue floral wrap dress draped elegantly over her figure, the nude pantyhose adding a polished touch, and her small heeled pumps clicked lightly against the floor as she crossed her legs. Her hair was freshly styled, and her makeup was as flawless as ever, a picture of refined femininity. "You look wonderful," Tamara said, her eyes flicking over Paul's carefully curated outfit. "You too," Paul replied with a knowing smile. "That dress is stunning." They exchanged a few more pleasantries before placing their order, a light breakfast of fruit, yogurt, and a single buttered croissant each. A choice fitting for women who, on the outside, embodied graceful maturity. Once the waiter had left, Tamara leaned in slightly, her voice lowering. "Does anyone know that you and your mother have switched bodies?" Paul took a slow sip of his coffee before shaking his head. "Not a soul," he said confidently. "Mum even thinks about how to swap us back." Tamara nodded approvingly, her expression unwavering. "Good," she said. "No one in my family knows that I'm really Chad in my mother's body. Not my father, not my sister. As far as they're concerned, I'm just Mum." Their breakfasts arrived, placed before them with delicate care. The two of them exchanged a brief glance before raising their coffee cups in unison. "To secrecy," Tamara said with a small smirk. "To secrecy," Paul echoed, their cups clinking softly before they took a sip, sealing their unspoken pact. The schoolyard buzzed with the usual midday energy shouts, laughter, and the rhythmic bounce of basketballs against the pavement. Chad stood near the edge of the court, spinning a basketball in his hands when a sudden smack on his back sent the ball tumbling to the ground. "What's up, player?" Susan's voice rang out, her grin wide as she jogged up beside him. Chad turned, rolling his shoulders with a smirk. "Nice one," he muttered, bending down to scoop up the ball. As the noise of the schoolyard surrounded them, the two of them strolled toward a quieter corner, blending in seamlessly with the other students. Once they were out of earshot, Susan leaned in. "Does anyone know that you and your son have swapped bodies?" she asked, keeping her voice low. Chad, or rather Tamara, inside Chad's body, shook his head. "No one knows. Not my husband, not my daughter." Susan grinned. "Same at my house. It's a complete secret." They exchanged a knowing high five, their shared secret strengthening the strange bond between them. As they turned back toward the courts, their conversation shifted, their voices lowering again. "God, it's such a relief to be out of bras and shapewear," Susan murmured. Chad chuckled. "Right? No tight pantyhose, no makeup, no heels. I don't miss any of that." But, Susan added, stretching her arms behind her head. The best part? Just feeling young and full of energy again. Chad nodded in agreement, but as they neared the courts, they both instinctively shifted gears. Their talk of freedom faded, replaced by casual mentions of schoolwork and upcoming assignments, things that fit their new roles better. A few minutes later, one of the other students tossed a ball in their direction. Hey, you guys want to run a game? Susan and Chad exchanged a quick glance before grinning. Absolutely, Susan said, rolling up her sleeves. Let's do this, Chad added, spinning the ball in his hands once more. With that, they joined the game, throwing themselves into the thrill of competition, blending in perfectly with their peers. No one would have suspected that, beneath their youthful exteriors, two middle-aged women were relishing the chance to live life all over again. The early afternoon sun casts shadows across the schoolyard. A chain-link fence, slightly rusted in places, separates the vibrant, bustling basketball court from a quieter section of the yard. Two girls, seemingly in a world of their own, stand close to the fence, their backs to the open space, their gazes locked on the energetic game unfolding before them. The first girl is wearing a brightly coloured, knee-length sundress. The fabric is patterned with cheerful yellow sunflowers against a backdrop of sky blue. A wide white belt cinches her waist, emphasising the dress's silhouette. Her feet are clad in simple white sandals, and her long, dark hair is pulled back into a high ponytail, revealing a pair of delicate silver hoop earrings. The second girl is dressed in a more playful ensemble. She sports a denim overall skirt, slightly above the knee, layered over a striped, long-sleeved top in alternating pink and white stripes. Tiny, colourful patches of flowers and cartoon characters adorn the skirt. Her feet are tucked into bright red sneakers, with white socks peeking out from above the tops. She has two pigtails held in place by matching pink hair ties. They stand close, their heads bent slightly towards each other as they whisper, their voices barely audible above the rhythmic thump of the basketball and the shouts of the boys. The fence provides a sense of privacy, creating a small, intimate space where they can share secrets and observations without being overheard. Alison, her arms crossed, glanced at the game before turning to the girl beside her. "No one knows I'm Eric in Anna's body," she murmured, barely moving her lips. "Does anyone know that you've swapped bodies with your daughter?" Francine, or rather Russell in Francine's body, let out a soft chuckle. "Heavens no," she whispered back. "No one knows that I'm her father in Francine's body." The two girls exchanged a knowing look, their faces unreadable to anyone passing by. To the outside world, they were just a couple of schoolgirls chatting about school or gossiping about classmates. In reality, they were two men in the bodies of their own daughters. Meanwhile, down at the street intersection where students would soon be crossing, a crossing guard in a reflective vest was having a conversation of his own. "Does anyone know?" he asked in a low voice, his hand resting on the stop sign he held. The mother beside her, a woman in her mid-30s, pushing a stroller, glanced around before shaking her head. "No," she admitted, adjusting the strap of her purse. "No one knows that I'm really a boy in my mum's body." The crossing guard nodded approvingly. "Good," he said, waving a few cars past. The mother exhaled, watching the schoolyard from afar. She had played her role well so far. No one suspected the truth.